I can tell you there's a good guy and a bad guy. No, actually, the Scarecrow is about Jack McAvoy and Rachel Walling, two characters I've written about in the past. Jack, I wrote about 14 years ago. I wrote a story called The Poet that was about Jack, and I can't really talk about the Scarecrow without talking a little bit about The Poet. The Poet was the first book I wrote as a full-time author. I had, for 4 books, balanced a career where I was a newspaper reporter by day and a fearless crime writer at night, writing fiction. And I got to the point where, very fortunate point where I could choose between these two careers. And since day one, when I decided to be a writer, I had wanted to be a crime writer. I obviously took the choice of being a full-time novelist, which is a wonderful, fortunate thing. And so the first book I wrote completely wrote as a full-time novelist was about a newspaper reporter. But then in recent years, I don't know exactly what the situation is in this country, but in my country, the newspaper business has taken a very steep downward turn. It's a downward spiral. Some people think it's a death spiral. The line is that the internet has killed the newspapers because readers are going to the internet for their news and advertisers are going to the internet as well. And so every paper in my country has had declining readership. So the task was to write a story, a human story, a story about a character in a chase and so forth, all the ingredients you need in a thriller, but also reflect a little bit of what's going on. So in The Scarecrow, it's about Jack McAvoy. We haven't seen him really in any significant way for about 14 years, and it's about his end days as a journalist. In the first page, we learned that Jack just got laid off, and he has a couple weeks of work to kind of finish things up, and then he's going to be gone. And it's about what he tries to do in with his last story. He wants to go out with a bang, and he wants to do something that they'll remember him by, and so it's about his last story. And this story takes him in contact with Rachel Walling, who was paired with him in The Poet. I've always loved that, the relationship of them in The Poet. In fact, when I was done The Poet and I said I'm done with Jack, I said I'm not done with Rachel. I really love that character, and I found ways of bringing her back. And if you've followed along with some of my books, you know she has a relationship with Harry Bosch. I've kind of brought her into other parts of the world that I write about, and so she's back as well. What inspired me to write this book and what brought me here was what was happening in the business. That's not a whole big part of this book. This is a road story. Jack gets on the story and he leaves the newsroom, and hopefully you'll, as a reader, you'll read it the way he's moving very quickly across a couple of states after a killer, and at some point he has to wonder whether he's chasing a killer or the killer's chasing him. And that's really what the book's about. I end up standing up here talking a lot about the newspaper business, but that is ancillary to the story here because I write thrillers. I don't write books about the end of the newspaper era. So here I am brought to this idea of writing this book because the internet is killing the newspaper business. So what I decided to do was construct a story that Jack would be on where someone was using the internet to kill people. And so, and there's other layers in this book, hopefully, that you'll see where that kind of metaphor is repeated or that theme is repeated. And this is not to say I think the internet is a bad thing. The internet has changed the world. It's changed my world very much for the positive. But I am constantly intrigued, and if you've read my books, you'll see it over and over again with this idea of technology and how we make great strides with it. But for every good thing that we do with it, there's always going to be somebody in a dark corner figuring out how to turn it against us. And they're out there.